Welcome back, builders. Today we are going to be taking a look at Helheim, Dusk and Death. This is a nation that has been affected by the changes from Dom 5 to Dom 6 quite a bit, especially the mount changes and the split of air into air and glamour. Overall, I would say that it did hit this nation kind of hard. We'll see as we talk about it, but there's some issues that they have. That being said, I do think that they are perfectly playable, and I was actually shocked by how good the combination of air, glamour, death was. It gives you some unique combo spells that you can pull off that are pretty hard for other nations to do. Let's take a look at the history of Helheim. Helheim is a land of shadows, windswept moors, and silent mountains. Here lies Nippehalan, the stone cave where the dead pass through on their way to hell. The hanged kings, ancient Vanir who hanged themselves to learn the secrets of death, rule the land from their thrones in Helheim. Helheim is inhabited by the Vanir, a race of tall and innately magical beings who are able to trick mortals with their glamour. The Vanir of Helheim have sequestered themselves away from the Vanir of Vanheim and have not been part of the great war with the giants. For ages they have been guiding the dead on their way to hell in service of a dead god. Now a new god is rising, and the old ways are changing. The Valkyries, guides of the dead, have become messengers of death and sacred warriors of the new god. Valkyries, the female Vanir of Helheim, are able to fly, a gift from the dead god they once served. Unlike their cousins in Vanheim, the Vanir of Helheim are not shipwrights and sailors. So this is directly related to Vanheim and the other Heims. These are Vanir, what the Dominions community refers to as elves. However, they are unlike their other cousins. They're not sailors, which is a pretty big deal actually, and they are much more focused in on death and glamour magic. As for our national features, we have flying troops, and that really is only our Valkyries and the commander Dis, who is kind of a mounted Valkyrie. We have illusions, our troops have glamour, and we prefer cold scales +1. We have Vanir heavy infantry, Valkyries, and Vanir cavalry. For magic, death, glamour, air, some earth, and some fire. That the earth and fire especially are very limited. We have average priests. Our best are priest level 2s. Interesting enough, for scales and blesses, we have a cold limit of +1, a death limit of +1, and a magic limit of +1. If you don't know what that means, in Dom 6 they changed scales to only go ±2 unless you have something affecting them. So this essentially means that we can go down to cold 3, death 3, and magic 3. Whether you would want to do those things, we will talk about later, but it is something to note that that is a lot of scale shifting that they can do. They have the standard forts of the age. Starting in with their units, we have a standard human militia in the Surf Warrior. Nothing to write home about here. They are a standard militia unit. Use case is generally siege chaff, whether you're sieging down or you're needing to defend. It is notable for this nation that all the rest of our troops are very expensive. So there is actually some use case here that you might need some surf warriors to help you break into forts or to defend your own forts, just to give yourself some bulk on siege strength. Next up, we have our standard troops. The game describes these ones as heavy infantry. We have two different versions of Huskarl, and we have a Herdman. The Huskar come in spear flavor with slightly more defense and axe flavor with slightly more damage, both of which have the glamour inherent to Vanir units, which also includes stealth. Glamour means that you get mirror images of yourself, and when you get attacked in melee or arrows shot at you, there's a chance that they hit the glamour instead of you. And as those get hit, they pop and you become a normal hittable unit. When would you want to use each one? Generally speaking, the spears are length 3, so if you're fighting other length 3 weapons and you don't want to get repelled, that would be good there. It is a piercing weapon, only 14 damage. We do have 12 attacks, so that is much better than just the standard 10 of human infantry. And you should note that we're wearing a ringmail cuirass, an iron cap, and we have a shield. So our protection is 9, so I don't know if I would call that heavy, but it's decent. It's decent. We do have precision 12 with a javelin, and 11 strength. So their javelins are decent again. The axe variety is the same. However, we have slightly higher protection at 11, and our defense is down to 14. Same precision with a javelin. So either version, it's generally speaking worth throwing those javelins unless you're going to throw into something that you know is not going to take the damage. The axe is usable when either the length one, you're not worried about getting repelled, or you just need that extra damage. Like going from 14 to 19 is quite a big thing. So I did a battle in one of my test games on a throne that had a bunch of cave drakes, and I really needed the extra damage from these axes to be able to hack through those. The spears were struggling quite a bit, actually, to put those things down. I think either one of those is usable. Generally, I start with spears until I start seeing targets that I want to use axes on. Finally, our third infantry unit, the Herdmen. This is your more elite unit. Last week, we looked at Merverni, and we were entranced with their more elite unit. This is a very similar unit, but probably better. We don't have to awaken tattoos here. We start with the glamour, and they're stealthy. We're using the same broadsword, so 13 attack with 17 damage. So not quite as much as the axe, but we are better at hitting with it. Broadswords also give you an extra defense. So our defense skill here is 17. Note, some of that is coming from our shield. Our protection is 13. So very sturdy troop, 13 HP, so a little higher than human. But note that you're paying for it. 30 gold, 17 resources, 25 recruitment. If we look at our other ones here, 25, 13, 21, 25, 10, 21. So you'll note high gold, decent to high resource cost, high recruitment. I think you would struggle with getting a decent amount of these troops if you were to go sloth. I think you probably want to lean towards neutral or even order if you could. I think you would struggle to get a decent amount of these troops together if you went heavy into turmoil or sloth or sloth. So you really need to think about your scales and what units you're going to be using. Our final non-sacred troop is the mounted Herdmen. They have a light lance and a javelin. Glamour, they ride fey horses. 11 protection, 19 defense. Good unit, but man, they are expensive. 50 gold, 14 resources, 46 recruitment points. If you can afford these, though, this is almost equivalent to like a sacred unit. Like, this is a pretty darn elite thing. However, and this is one of the problems that this nation has gained moving over to Dominion 6, we ride fey horses. Fey horses are resistant to poison. They have stealth and glamour, so that's good. They're normal animals. They have true sight. They're very disease resistant, and they're a smart mount. Smart mount means that they're better at going back to your capital to be recruited and getting a new mount. However, that probably won't happen because all of your fey horses will die. They are wearing no armor and they have 4 protection. They will die to arrows. They will die to militia. They will die to elite troops. They will die to everything. These units are greatly let down by this horse. 14 defense is pretty good, but defense doesn't matter for ranged attacks, and you're just going to get harassed down. You're only going to have 2 per square. It is frustrating the amount of casualties these take. So one thing you could try to do is we do have okay access to earth, so you could try to get some earth buffs on them to raise their protection. You also could try to gift them Mistform to lower damage that they're taking generally to 1. That would help them. However, we're not going to have a ton of mages who can do either of those things, so it's a pain point. It's a pretty big pain point. Moving on, we have 2 different sacreds. I'm going to talk about the Helheim first. This is our cap-only cavalry. Very similar to the cav we were just looking at. However, now we're mounted with a sacred unit. The Helheim is a very similar mount. We still have the 4 protection. We still have 17 defense, 22 HP. Whatever the differences are, they're relatively minor. 12 magic resist. Over here, we still had 12, so not a huge difference there. Same weakness applies, though. They're not wearing any armor. So I have been incredibly frustrated in my testing to make these sacreds into something really good. These used to be absolute terrors. If you go back and look at content from Dominions 5, you'll see people talking about expanding with 1 leader and 5 of these, and that's an entire expansion party. Expansion has gotten harder in 6, and in addition, even if I was winning things with small amounts of these, I generally would need more than 5 to take provinces, even relatively easy ones. You lose your mount, which means after the battle is over, your sacred goes back to the capital to be re-recruited. Yes, it's nice that you get a half-priced one. However, the attrition is atrocious. On no other nation have I seen as many people back at my capital waiting to be re-recruited. When we did Arcacephali, we had some of that, but I have had 5, 6, 7 some turns, more than I could even afford, because they still cost the sacred point, the holy point, to re-recruit. So yeah, it's nice that they make it back, whether it's the mount or the rider, but it's still attrition. Like, you're losing people out in your expansion parties. When we get to the talking about blessings, this is what a lot of our blessing talk is going to center around, is how do you make these units better? Because they really struggle, actually. Our second cap-only sacred is the Valkyrie. These are relatively nice. They are they're Vanir, so they have all the benefits of glamour and stealth. They're naturally flying. Of note, these are not storm flyers. We are a nation that would like to get storm up, so if that's the route you take, just note that. They do have spirit sight. I didn't mention, but Healings also have spirit sight, so that gives us the ability to essentially have dark vision, which is very, very handy if we want to go into the caves or other battlefield things are happening. The Valkyries are 12 protection, so I would call that good. 17 defense, good. They have 13 attack, good. They have a light lance, so you do get that first initial hit, good. 13 attack, very respectable. They are relatively expensive, 45 gold, 18 resources, 29 recruitment, but nowhere near our cavalry sacred, so that gives them a benefit there. These are pretty decent. They're going to struggle a bit just being so outnumbered in the back line, so you got to think about how many you need to hit that critical mass to either alpha strike out the leadership or survive and brawl near the leadership. Either way, you're not expanding with just 5 of these in a leader. I've had better success expanding with these than I have with the Helheim, mainly because I would have a front line of some Huskarls. They would generally be led by either a Vanhurst or preferably a Van Jarl. We'll talk about why that is in a second. That way you have glamour troops in the front, holding off whatever's up there. These jump in the back, ideally kill the leadership. If they don't kill the leadership fast, then if nothing else, split up the enemy so you don't get surrounded. One of the weaknesses we have, these are very good troops. Like, even what I would say is probably our worst line troop is the Spear Huskarl, arguably between him and the Axe. These are expensive, and they have a high recruitment cost. So even if your capital has, let's say, 250 recruitment points, you're only getting 10, 11, 12 of these at most per turn. They don't have formation fight or anything, but I did find that I tended to get wrapped a lot. And what you don't want is many attacks coming to the same guy, popping their glamour, and then just getting goinked. Because these are expensive. Like, you really, they're good troops, but you don't want to be losing them either. One-on-one, you will win fights because of your glamour, your high attack, your high defense, your decent to good protection. But when you get very outnumbered, you're going to start seeing that attrition. And sometimes your lines crumple really quick if the enemy just really outnumbers you and they wrap both sides. They'll just pop that glamour, kill that guy, and then you'll just get more and more surrounded. Luckily, when that does happen, your leadership is mounted, so they tend to get away, even if things go really south, but that's definitely not what you want. You need to be expanding because your troops are very expensive. You need to be out there taking territory and getting forts up. So I think you really need to consider, when you're thinking of your pretender build, how you are going to expand. Is it sacred heavy? Is it troop heavy? Is it a combination of both? You need to have a plan in place. Moving on, we have the Van Scout. Relatively standard scout. He does have glamour, and he is very stealthy because of that. At stealth 75, you're at the upper echelons of stealthiness. They have forest survival, and they have mountain survival. That can help you move around a little bit quicker. Otherwise, they are an expensive scout. 55 gold, 15 resources is pretty expensive for a scout. They have good combat stats, but you never want to be in combat with a scout, so yeah. Very usable. Ideally, you'd find just some random indie scouts, and you'd prefer to use those just because they're not taking up fort turns. Next up, we have the Vanir. We have essentially many flavors of the same thing here. Vanir is kind of your standard researcher, actually. Only 9 research for 76 per year. So you are above the 1 research per 10, but not by much. You have 1 air, 1 glamour. That's actually not as bad as it sounds. There are a few spells you can get on with both of those. Notably, you would like air shield, because that will protect you from arrows, which will keep your glamour up and will save your Fey horse, which, as you're noticing the pattern, has no armor. So nothing like a stray arrow or 2 killing your Fey horse and making you go back and remount your leadership. Otherwise, they are a priest, so they can help you get blessings out. They're okay. What is nice about these is if you have Storm up, they can Storm power up to Air 2 for better buffs and lightning spam. If you Twilight, which is a new glamour spell, which gives the battlefield a accuracy penalty for both melee and ranged, but it also gives glamour mages +1 pathing, so you could be a glamour 2 mage. Both of those have a lot of spells that they unlock, and they're pretty good. Even at glamour 1, though, you could spam ephemeral warriors or phantom warriors, whatever the lower level one is. It's okay. So these are pretty decent, and with a little bit of buffing, they actually can go up and brawl pretty decently. 20 defense, 11 protection. They have the horse weakness, but they're okay. They're not bad. It is always nice when your main research mage can also join combat when needed, and this is definitely a mage who can do that. Next up, we have the Helheim. Very, very similar to the previous one, except for the fact that there's more upkeep cost. We are a death and a glamour mage, so I really wouldn't recruit a lot of these. I think your starting leader is one. They are 100 leadership, where I didn't mention this. The Vanir is only 75, so you really don't want to be leading troops with this. So this would be your slight step up at 255 gold, very expensive. I don't get a lot of these because we have a better option immediately following, and that is the Vanir. The Vanir, 100 leadership, but now we're up to 410 gold, so we are getting very pricey. However, we have good pathing. We have 2 air, 1 death, 1 glamour. 2 air immediately sticks out because you can do personal mistform, and you like personal mistform, because that will keep you much, much safer than you otherwise would be. There's also some cross-pathing between air, glamour, and air and death. These guys are going to struggle to do most of those spells until you can get boosters. Boosters are pretty darn good for this nation. But if nothing else, you can throw some lightning bolts. There's plenty of air buffs to put on yourself or troops. You could do some blurs for your front line. Lots and lots of things to do here. You're also priest level 2. So that means you can bless your troops more efficiently. We don't end up with tons and tons of sacred, so it's not too bad blessing things with Holy Ones, but Holy 2 just makes it easier. And that also gives us access to Sermon of Courage, which is always appreciated. We're not a nation that struggles overly much with morale, but we are generally outnumbered, so you just don't want to get routed, and hanging in there is always a good thing for them. Again, we have the Fey horse weakness, so that's really holding this unit back, unfortunately. Otherwise, I think this is the ideal unit to be leading your troops around because of the 100 leadership. You really want to be in formation to take advantage of your good line troops with glamour and high defense. I'm going to skip this guy for a second, and we're going to look at the Dis. The Dis is a mounted Valkyrie. 1 air, 1 death, 1 glamour, so pretty similar to what we've been seeing. Notably, she does have combat caster, so that can be your cup of tea if you're interested in that. I would generally only get a couple of these during the game. I think this is probably your best profit chassis. The reason being is that she flies. Map move 26. Plus you have some flying sacreds, so your prophet can fly around with sacred things. and support your other armies and go from army to army with that core of Valkyries. She's got 26 map move. If you look at our Valkyries, they also have 26 map move. So the fastest that we're going to really get here. Again, though, she has a Dishester. No armor on that horse either. Relatively similar sets to everything else. That's a weakness. But like I said, I think this is going to be your prophet chassis. Having a flying prophet is very good, helps you get from throne to throne, or like I said, bring your sacred reinforcements from battle to battle. So I think that is her strongest suit. Otherwise, she's notable for having the air death crosspath. So she is going to be the chassis which could do summon corpseman constructions, which gives you very good siege chaff or just frontline chaff. Much better than using your militia units to do that. That being said, we don't have the greatest air income, so you're really going to have to make choices about where your air gems are going. In the test game in the background here, I found I think I have +1 air. Like, we got nothing. +2 air, and this is essentially the mid-late game, and that's what I ended up with. So I was very disappointed with that. I had a lot of air plans, and they did not come to pass because I just didn't find enough gems. Next up, we have the Hengedroth. This is your big cap mage. He comes with 3 death, 2 glamour, and a random air, earth, death, glamour. So very high in things. Could come naturally as death 4. We do have the 10%, but I generally don't count those. So either a death 4 or a glamour 3 and some mix of some cross pathing. Very strong mage. These guys also make okay thugs. I think the best one would be air, because you could give an air gem and he could personal misform in addition to his other buffs. But these guys are okay at thugging. They're very expensive, but because of some unique pathing that we can do that we'll talk about when we get to spells, he's pretty good. You're going to want one of these guys probably to go out and site search because he is glamour 2 for you, and just depending on cross paths. Finally, our last one here is the Svartalf. This is like evil dwarves. So they come standard with Earth 2 and Death 2, and they can get fire. Note that's our only fire source. Air, Earth, Death, and Glamour. So quite a few different ones. For me, I like to get one that has fire, and he's going to be the one that goes out and site searches for me. The fire gems are handy. There's several things we'd like to do with them. Whether you'll get to them or not is of some question, but I think it's worth trying. They don't have any crafting bonuses, unfortunately, but they will probably end up being crafters, because you could either power this or from somewhere else get a dwarven hammer, dwarf earth boots, and you're off and running. With Death 2, you can make skull staves, lots and lots of things that they can do. They are 216 gold yearly upkeep for only 15 research, so you're probably not going to make these main researchers, but you're going to want a few of them for rituals, for casting, or for foraging. Lots of things for them to do. They do have dark vision, so they could help you underground as a caster. They are your source of earth buffs if you can get that out onto your troops. Lots of things for these guys to do, so they are pretty good. So your capital's always going to have things to do, and you're going to be probably constrained by money, because you didn't hear me say anything about cheap. Our cheapest guy here is 220. So we are very expensive for our leaders and mages. Losing those hurts a lot. As for national items, we have none. As for national spells, we have several. We have Summon Valkyries. This is a pretty good spell, but we struggle to cast it. The Vanir is our closest one, but you still need to find a way to get him an additional air. It's 3 air and 1 death. For 1 air gem, though, you get 7 Valkyrie, and they are the standard ones that you would normally hire. So you could go a couple routes. You could build him an air booster, if you have somebody who could do that. You need air 4 to get the cheapest booster, which is a helmet, and you're going to struggle for air gems, so just keep that in mind. If you were to go that route, you could give him a couple of those gems, maybe have your god present or your prophet present, and they could buff those Valkyries, that would be pretty good. 7 Valkyries for 1 air gem is a good deal, I feel. Alternatively, you could give him 2 air gems per cast. That's getting a little more pricey. I don't know if that's quite as worth it. Or you could get your storm up, summon storm power, and then cast it. However, remember, your Valkyries do not have storm flight, so they would be just normal troops. That being said, though, Valkyries aren't bad, and we are a nation that will take something that's going to buff our sacreds. So anybody who can summon sacreds, I feel, is good. I don't think that's a bad thing to have. So a great spell that's just kind of hard for us to use, unfortunately. Next up, we have Summon Dwarf of the 4 Directions. Basically, within our mythos, there's 4 dwarves that hold up the sky, and we can trick them to come work for us. And the more of these we summon, there are 4 of them, the more disasters start striking the world. So you start getting hurricanes, and then if we get them all, we get Perpetual Storm up. It is noteworthy to say here, this is not a global spell like Perpetual Storm would be. So there's no way to stop this unless they kill your dwarves. So if you have your dwarves, safe somewhere, or you're just careful not to lose them, there's nothing they can do about this. Of note, we can't really do this natively. 4 air and 3 earth, we have nobody close to that. The best we could do would be one of our Svartalf getting, 2 earth and 1 air. That's a long way to go in boosters. You're probably not doing that. So if you want to do this, you probably need to take close pathing at least on your god to be able to do it. It is Conjuration 8, so you're looking at relatively late game, but this could be like a game winner for you. You're not going to be immune to any of the things it's doing, but Perpetual Storm is something we quite like, and if you're prepared for it and other people aren't, that gives you an advantage. We're also okay at getting underground, so maybe you go underground where Perpetual Storm and hurricanes don't hurt you, so you just get ready, and then you do this whenever you're ready for it. So quite flavorful, quite interesting, quite powerful. Hard to pull off, though, like many of those types of spells tend to be. We have Great Bears. This summons Great Bears. It is a use for nature gems, but as with most nations, I would say a bad one. We don't have native nature, so any nature gems that you get are going to be rather precious. I'm going to jump to Jotun Wolves. If you were going to spend nature gems on something, this would probably be what I would get. Sacred, so that's quite nice. They have fear, they have cold resistant, they have snow move, they're berserkers. This is actually a pretty good unit. Held back by the fact that we're going to struggle to get nature. So unlikely that you will get these guys, but if you did, I don't think you would be too sad here. This is a very solid unit. 2 attacks, fear, decent protection, okay defense, good HP. I like these guys quite a bit, but unlikely that you will actually get any use out of them. Finally, we have Drog, which are like magic undead, essentially. As they take damage, they shapeshift. They have fear, they have amphibian, poison resist, a chill aura. All that being said, though, they're pretty expensive for death gems, and I feel like you're going to want to be crafting a lot of death items. You're going to want to be casting big death spells. You're going to want to be summoning other death things. I don't know if you spare death gems for these guys. You get so few of them for that price. I don't know if they're worth it. That being said, they are decent units, just perhaps overpriced. As for other magic, there's a lot of interesting things here. So we've previously mentioned a few times Storm. Storm is very good for us. We have lots of Air 1s that would like to be Air 2s. We have our only missile thing that we do is Javelins, and we hate getting shot with arrows. So a Storm destroying projectiles would be quite good for us. We have some flyers, but we don't have to rely on them. So knocking other people's ability to fly out is not a bad thing for us. So Storm is definitely a major consideration. As talked about, we have some interesting things we can do for thugging. So Personal Miststorm is something that a couple of our units can do. Very strong buff. Mistform for your line troops is also very strong. We have Shroud of Bewilderment at 2 glamour. This is another really nice one. If you're trying to thug, this is a magic resist, or you get bewildered, which means you don't hit the mage that casts this, and there's a chance that you just start hitting random people around you. So generally speaking, thugs get pretty surrounded. So this can be pretty good. Like, they're going to be hitting each other, which means they're not hitting you, which means they're not lowering your defense or hitting your mirror images. It's a pretty nice buff, and it's only at enchantment 3, which is not too hard to get. Also at enchantment 3, we have Horrible Visage. This is a very interesting spell. It's one of the new ones because it's a glamour spell. 2 glamour, 1 death. And it's a self buff only, and it gives you Dread +5. Dread is essentially fear that can be seen through with some of the special sights. But between bewilderment, maybe Mistform, and that, you have a lot of defensive buff power going on there. Fear is still very strong. Generally speaking, you want multiple sources of fear. You don't want to have just one thing with some fear. But we have death magic, so we could be doing other spells which lower morale. We have some units that can get some fear on them. It could be something usable. We also have the pathing needed for Wailing Winds, albeit it would be difficult to cast, but we could get there. So fear plus Wailing Winds is quite strong. Another interesting cross path that you don't see in a lot of nations, Cloud of Dreamless Slumber. Evocation 3, so pretty low. And its area is 3+, 2 glamour, 1 air, and it gives you a lingering sleep cloud, which is pretty interesting. Undead are unaffected by it, so maybe you summon up some undead and throw those in front, and then tar pit people there while they sit in the sleep cloud. If you fall asleep, you lose all your defense, so even junky undead could hit you. Quite good. Because of our pathing, we have mid-air, we have mid-glamour, we have low or high death. You have a lot of options for spells, and you need to think about that because you're just never going to have the numbers of troops to be able to just steamroll people. You need to be using your magic effectively. And I think part of that is matching the magic to what you're fighting. If you're fighting somebody with low magic resist, glamour is very good. Sleeping them is very good. If you're fighting people that have good magic resist and good protection, maybe lean into the death spells that are armor negating and start hitting those like shadow bolts and things like that, or some of the illusionary damage from glamour. Glamour is a very strong path. Death is a very strong path. And I would still say air is a very strong path. So you have a lot of options. So try to match up the magic that you're going for the target that you're going to be using it on. As for heroes, we've only got one, the Hengedrotling. This guy's, yeah, he's all right, but he doesn't do anything that we really can't already do. Like, we can get up to a death 4, so that's not super amazing. He does have good cross-pathing for Wind of Death, or for doing Wailing Winds with some boosters going on there. So he's strong, but I mean, he's just a guy. He doesn't open up anything new for us. He's not immortal, so you don't have that going for you. So if you get him, you'll be happy. If you don't, it's not the end of the world. Same problem everyone else has. His mount has no armor. I guess it should be mentioned, maybe actually crafting barding for your leaders might be worth it. If you're going to thug, maybe at least give their mount something just to keep them safe. If you're going to start investing into thugs, maybe you give them that and then like one other item. Could be something to consider. Okay, so bringing it all together, we have glamour troops that are good fighters, but they're very expensive, both for gold, for resources, and for recruitment points. We have usable to good sacreds with a stark weakness on the horse. Also was not mentioned, the horse is sacred, so whatever we take for our blessing is going to affect them. We have good magic access to good pathing, and we're good at the magic we can do, but it's very expensive. We have a little splash of earth and a tiny bit of fire on the Svartov, so we can get some other buffs in there. because we lost blood magic between 5 and 6, and we have no astral magic, we cannot communion. So we are probably going to be looking at wanting to make boosters for glamour, for air, and for death, and for earth. So that's a lot of crafting that you're going to want to be doing. So getting out and site searching is very, very important for us. We have lots of uses for air gems. Hope that you find some good air income. We would like to make alquills. We could make lightless lanterns. We could make skull mentors. And because our mages are so expensive and not great researchers, you're probably going to need some form of research booster. In my test game, I was summoning specters and giving them skull mentors, and they kind of became my researchers because I kept having to pull my mages off for desperate fights that were going on, and I needed them up there fighting. So something to consider there. We would like to do some ritual magic, but none of our people here are particularly high enough to be able to do ritual magic. So if you want something, you're probably going to need to do it on your pretender. As for our income, we get a glamour, and we get 4 death and 1 earth. So you're going to have a lot of death income, even if you get unlucky on death sites, which I feel death and nature are kind of the 2 most common ones. So you're going to want something to do with death, and it's probably going to be lots of forging and summoning. So all of that together is going to really inform your pretender design. We also don't have holy 3s. So an immobile pretender means you're relying on just your profit. So another thing to consider there. Let's take a second and bring up our chassis choices. All right, as you can see here, we are not spoiled for choice, but we have an okay spread. We have a lot of the usual suspects that we would see for the Dom ones. We've got the dragons. We've got the son of Vanir. A couple different choices down here. We have the Norse Titans. We do have the Earth Mother. As for Dominion 4s, several different choices here. So I think your biggest thing here is going to be how heavy scales do you need? How heavy bless do you need? And you're going to tailor what you get from there. So I found myself drawn to the Great Enchantress quite a lot because I need to have access to glamour for a lot of the blesses I tend to want. She's cheap. You can go with lots of different pathing because the new path cost is only 10. She's also a gem gin, so she'll give you an extra glamour gem, which can be rather useful. You do have access to the Demi Lich, which is another favorite for a lot of people. That's another death scale. That doesn't stack with the +1 we've already got, so that's kind of whatever. We could go some extra growth to counter that death scale. That would take us back up to max growth 2. We could go extra order. We could go extra magic if we want to go crazy. But these are all very expensive. Like, I was not having a good time trying Awake expanders because I had junky blesses and junky scales. And I feel like you need the best of both worlds, essentially. I tried to make something out of Ascension, but I just couldn't do it. She was just too pricey. She was just too pricey off the bat. She's not really survivable enough at the beginning. Like, you're really going to be sad if your god dies when you're expanding. Same thing with the dragons. So I would tend probably towards either an immobile up here or a Dom 1. So from what I looked at, I made several different incarnations here. This is the one I think I've had the most success with. We went Awe. This is dormant, by the way. We went Awe, and I just expanded without Awe using Valkyries and our line troops. Awareness is nice. If you're using your cavalry, they tend to get quite outnumbered, and unsurroundable means that more things have to attack you before you start taking the defense penalty. But your Valkyries also tend to get quite swarmed when they fly into the back. So I felt that was usable. It was okay. I also went Heroism. In the patch previous to making this video, Heroism has been nerfed from plus 50% XP down to 35, but I still feel like it's one of the better 1-point blesses, and I just ended up with 1 extra point. With Awe and Awareness and Heroism, this is a very good bless for our leadership. They make everybody kind of sort of thuggy. All of our leaders that are going to have troops are sacred, so they'll always have the Awe and Awareness and the Heroism. So it applies to our mages, it applies to our actual troop leaders, it applies to our thugs. I feel like this bless is fine for both of our sacreds. What it is missing is killingness. We do not have the most killy sacreds, unfortunately, but I just couldn't fit anything else in there. Also, this one gave us good pathing. So with 4 air, we can make air boosters, which is quite handy for a lot of our mages. We'd like Storm up very, very much, and we don't have anybody who can get Storm up. You need to be at least air 3 to be able to afford, with heavy gems, to cast Storm. So either she can cast herself, she could try to do Perpetual Storm, or she could make boosters for other people to be able to do it. She also took some Earth, so we can do our summon the dwarves to the 4 corners, and we could go making Perpetual Storm that way. She also is Earth 3, so that guarantees that we're going to be able to make Dwarven Hammers. We're going to be able to make Earth Boots, which helps our other crafters get rolling. I had a few extra points, so I went with Nature 2, just to give us some nature. I tend to find I do want to do a tiny bit of site searching with her, mainly at like high chance provinces. And so if I got lucky and just nabbed a little bit of nature, or I got an event that gave me some, she's somebody who could spend it and do some of our other summons, or make vine shields, or maybe even a thistle mace. So lots of options there, and high glamour for our Awe, of course. So I found this quite good. She is a weak human chassis, so just keep that in mind. You definitely do not want her getting into direct combat, and if you're going to take her into fights, you're probably going to want to get her at least a few items, low protection and whatnot. So protect her from arrows, protect her with some sort of protection. She is a gem genner, so that is quite nice. Doubles our basic income, essentially. I was pretty happy with this chassis. As for her scales, we went with 5 Dominion, 1 Order, 0 Production. We went all the way down to Cold 3, and my thought process was we have at least a little bit of cold resistance, and I needed points from somewhere, and hopefully this just hurts other people more than it hurts us. I went with 1 Growth to try to counteract some of the pop kill that 3 cold is going to give you, and I went with 3 Magic because we're not going to have a ton of researchers, and I wanted them to count. We also have a lot of magic that is MR negates, and 2 magic would lower magic resistant within our realm. So if we're on the back heel and we're doing lots of big, like, throw the kitchen sink at people fights, that means we're going to have a lot of glamour mages there, and a lot of glamour magic is magic resist, so that helps there. If you find another source of more efficient mages for research, or you summon in specters or whatever, this helps them out too. So I think that was a good investment. You could go lower on that and then increase maybe order or no, you can't increase growth because we're capped out because of our death scale. So it would probably have to be order or maybe even production. We would love all these things. Maybe you could drop this bless down even further, like take it down to maybe just blood surge, maybe, and then go heavier into scales. That could be a way to go. I did find in almost every test game I played, money was always an issue. I never had enough money. Your mages are so expensive, your troops are so expensive. I struggled on that. We don't have any discounts to any infrastructure or anything either. Another attempt I made here was with a Demi-Lich. I went with Stygian Flesh, thinking that helped our Arco Pegasus survive. And this did help the Mounted Sacred survive somewhat, but I still found that they had pretty heavy attrition. So another option that you could try, I didn't like this one. You can see here the scales were not as good either. This was my attempt to do 1 leader, 5 sacred expansion parties, and it failed. I just couldn't do it. and I really struggled to even pay for them. Another thing, like when you're looking at blesses, because arrows are so ridiculously bad for us, I was kind of tempted to try to take air shield, but it's so expensive, and we're looking to put up storm anyways, or twilight, or darkness, so we're going to want to do tons and tons of things that cancel out arrows anyways, that I felt like this was just too pricey for what I got out of it. I tried a quickness bless, but again, the attrition on our sacreds was so ridiculously high. Quickness doesn't really help our mages at all, so that really didn't do it. I tried in hard skin bless here. Again, 6 protection did not save our mounts, so that was kind of a dud. I think you could go with something like Arcane Finesse to give yourself more magic penetration and really lean into your magic. But if you're doing that, you're kind of forsaking your sacreds. And our sacreds are good enough that you want to use them. You just have to figure out where you're going to get it. Another place that you could maybe go is displacement. Attacking units have their attack skill reduced by 5. That would help quite a bit, but it doesn't help against arrows. So that's an issue there. I don't know. I think you have lots of things that could be good, and if anyone has had good blessing success, I'd be super interested to hear what was working for you, because this was an area that I really, really struggled. Okay, so those are my current thoughts on Helheim. Better than I thought. I went into these guys thinking they were going to be really bad, but the magic is a real high point for them, I feel. Losing the blood probably was stronger because if nothing else, it lets you do Sabbaths and then you could get your storm up that way. But you can get there. You can get there. I think you have to think very carefully about who your pretender is going to be for this nation, but they're doable. They're very expensive, and their sacreds frustrate me to no end. So I'm really curious to see if people have other thoughts on this nation. At the moment, the first pretender I showed you with the Awe is my favorite. I've had the most luck with that, and I feel it's a relatively versatile bless, but I would definitely be interested to see what other people have had success with. All right, hopefully this has been another enjoyable one for everybody. If you like this one, please remember to leave a like on it. That's how YouTube pushes out the video. And if you haven't yet, maybe I've earned your subscription this week and you'd like to subscribe for some more content. Dominions is still going strong, and I'm trying to integrate some other games on the channel just to have some variety for my own sanity's sake, so I'm not too deep into the woods with Dominion, but still enjoying it quite a bit, and I hope you are too. All right, take care, builders, and I will see you on the Helheim stream.